So the question that we're going to be discussing is, was Muslim and Christian trade between 1100 and 1500 dependent on a mutual appreciation of their respective artworks? Here we're attempting to explore whether the extensive trading between these two worlds show that this period can be better categorized by respect rather than conflict, as it often is. In some ways it is simplistic to want to characterize the Crusades as either being a time of conflict or one of trade. Both aspects were clearly present, but largely removed from one another. Conflicts had begun to die down by the mid-13th century, and 1272 marked the end of the final crusade, after which Christian and Muslim trade in art flourished. For example, 15th century saw the emergence of a whole new style of art, which incorporated designs from both cultures into their products. This was called Veneto-Saracenic art.
Thank you, Felix. So, what we can see is that there are many arguments as to why trade was not dependent on a mutual appreciation of art. So one way we can see this is by viewing trade solely on the basis of practicality. That is to say that Christians bought Islamic metalwork and pottery because of the quality of the products rather than due to an appreciation of the Islamic religion and culture and an actual appreciation of the objects they were buying. Another argument against trades being based on the appreciation of the art is that it was purely motivated by profit. Perhaps Islamic traders sold to Venetian merchants, for example with the Veneto-Saracenic art, solely for economic reasons, and vice versa. Furthermore, trade could have been based on visual appeal and nothing more, i.e. Christians found Islamic art attractive but did not appreciate the meaning of the art. Here it can be seen that trade was based not on a true appreciation of the art and its actual meaning, but solely for aesthetic appreciation.
The argument that I'm going to talk about first is about the practicality taking precedence over the artwork of the individual objects. The Hispano-Moresque jug, for instance, shows that there was an emphasis on the practicality of the object instead of it being purchased because of its artwork. The type of ware was originally developed by Muslims within Spain, but it was continued under Christian rule. The continuation of this style of pottery demonstrates that those who purchased the objects were more interested in the quality of the jug instead of the art on the individual jugs. In addition to this, it is clear that Christians in Italy also purchased the jugs because of their quality, as they went on to attempt to imitate this style of pottery, and that in turn led to the creation of the Italian Maiolica ware. If you're looking at the adaptation and the imitation of this style of Hispano-Moresque ware, it's a key indicator that those who purchased the good were more interested in how the jug was made and the quality of the actual jug, instead of the design and the artwork of that jug. The Veneto-Saracenic brassware style is another example of a high-quality good taking precedence over the artwork on the object. This style of work was frequently exported to Europe, which means that Europeans were more interested in the quality of Veneto-Saracenic brass instead of the artwork on the individual goods. Profit was a key incentive for those creating the jug, and by looking at the Veneto-Saracenic plate, it is evident that this was produced for an individual. The coat of arms which appears in the centre of the plate has 3 bulls, which is typical of European households. Because of the specific artwork on the plate, it is likely that it was purchased because of it. On the plate there are also scenes depicting hunting by wild animals, which was frequent in Islamic work. In addition to this, the artwork displayed around the edge and the general decorative theme is also Islamic. The production of this unique good would suggest that the artwork had a greater importance for the buyer. However, it is also important to state that the quality of the good would have also been an important factor, even if it was not necessarily the most important one. The incorporation of the coat of arms into the artwork and design of the plate shows respect and appreciation for the coat of arms itself. The sleek embedding of the coat of arms into the Muslim design would imply that there was a higher standard of craftsmen created it. Similarly, the Hispano-Moresque jug's artwork is also likely to have been an influencing factor on the people who purchased it. The coat of arms on the jug is prominently displayed on its front, so is likely to have been requested by the buyer. However, the artwork on this object is much more general and does not feature any specific scenes, but simply flowers and nature. Therefore, this object would suggest that it was not bought specifically because of the appreciation of the art, but is more likely because of the quality of the jug. The lack of incorporation of the Tuscan coat of arms into the decoration, for me, is an example of not so much an appreciation of the Christian art, but more exploiting it to sell the good abroad more easily. I mean, in addition to this, the lack of subtlety in including the coat of arms would suggest to me that there was a lower quality of craftsmen who created it.
Although Christians did desire the artistic goods of the Islamic world, it is unclear whether the influx of trade in art was because of the design was visually appealing, or whether the objects were statements of wealth and victory. There are accounts that many crusades, when returning home, missed the Islamic culture and food they had experienced. Christians thus appreciated the traditions, and consequently they found it necessary to trade such goods to ensure they could possess a part of the Islamic world. On the other hand, art may have represented Christian defeat of the Muslims during the Crusades, and therefore Christians may have been attempting to ridicule or mock the success of the people of the Islamic world.
Another argument which suggests that there was no appreciation for Muslim and Christian art is the one-sided nature of trade. The one-sided nature of trade is clear evidence that there's no mutual respect or appreciation for Muslim and Christians. We can see from our objects that all three of our objects were made by Muslims for Christians. So, for example, the earthenware jug, you see the cross of St. George, and likewise on the Syrian tray, you see the coat of arms. The only one that differs slightly is the lack of Edenhall glass, because it is completely Muslim. There's no Christian aspect of artwork on the object. The only Christian aspect of the object, the IHS symbol, was made at a later date in the 15th century. This made us believe that the earthenware jug was most likely pillaged, unlike the other objects which we believe were traded with. I think this highlights further the one-sided nature of trade. It reflects the notion that Christians saw themselves above Muslims. I think overall the Muslim traders would have been much more merchant-like and concerned with making profits for their families and making a living, whereas the Christian traders wouldn't trade with the Muslims. They would be buying Muslim artwork, and I think it would be more a way of establishing themselves as superior to the Muslims. I think if you look at this in the context of the period after the Crusades, where the Christians are asserting their superiority over the Muslims, I think trade reflects this. You don't see, well, we haven't found much evidence to suggest that it was a two-way trade system where Muslims would trade, where Christians would trade Christian artwork with Muslims.
Although there are many arguments to suggest that exchange of art was not dependent on mutual respect for the opposite religion, there are quite clear indications that Christian people did admire Islamic art, and therefore you could argue their motivation for acquiring art, such as pottery, glassware and architecture, was as a result of personal preference, and that the Islamic arabesque designs were actually admired. Some Christians had even become accustomed to the designs and patterns of the Muslim world, like Spain, for example, who had since the conquest in 711 integrated both Christian and Muslim cultures and traditions to coexist peacefully. In the capital Cordoba, bells rang to indicate the canonical hours, and Christian funeral processions passed through Muslim-majority neighbourhoods. Christians and Muslims appreciated each other's practices without hostility. Historian Bernard Riley explicitly stated that Christian communities within Spain adopted the dress and the diet of the Muslim settlers, and even managed a degree of bilingualism. Christians had adopted and embraced the Muslim culture long before the Crusades arrived, and therefore much of the Spanish population preferred the Arabic goods because they had simply been surrounded by them for centuries.
Grace and I thought of another argument to suggest that there was an appreciation for artwork, perhaps not mutual, but an appreciation nevertheless. In terms of trade, you see countries will trade necessities such as food or raw materials. So me and Grace wondered, why would they trade art? It's not something that's necessary to trade with, and yet Christians in particular seem keen to enjoy receiving Muslim artwork. I think to understand this argument, it is important to note that there's been about 60 years of direct conflict between Muslims and Christians during the Crusades. So why do Christians treat Muslim artwork on objects as trophies? I think the tray is a good example of this. The coat of arms engraved into the centre of the tray suggests that it was made specifically for a European household. It wasn't just pillaged from war. The tray could have been commissioned or received as a gift. I think if you compare this to a modern narrative, so the Soviets and USA during and even before the Cold War, you wouldn't have seen the two sides appreciating the opposite artwork. I think you would actually see a complete opposite, a propagandizing of the opposite ideology. To sum up this argument, I think you have to assume in some degree that there was an appreciation for the artwork, because it seems highly inconceivable that two separate ideologies would entertain and even buy objects that consisted of artwork that was of the opposite ideology.